Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it Ethiopia Crisis. If you've not been following the news or if you'd like to understand better what is happening in Ethiopia and why, then join me as I take a deep dive into the past, present and future trajectory of this African nation. Over the next 30 minutes, I'll try to explain to you as simply as I can the issues at hand with the help of my guests who will join me momentarily from New Delhi and Addis Ababa. But first, take a look at this ground report from Ethiopia.
We will bury the enemy with our blood and bones. Those were the words of Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize winning President Abiy Ahmed. He was speaking in Addis Ababa as he marked 1 year since war broke out in the northern Tigray region, and amid fears the conflict could be heading for the capital.
The pit which is dug will be very deep. It will be where the enemy is buried, not where Ethiopia disintegrates.
Ethiopia declared a state of emergency, that order prompted by claims from the Tigray People's Liberation Front that its forces had captured several towns in recent days and might march on the capital. The TPLF's forward position is around 235 miles to the north. Authorities in Addis have told residents to register their weapons and prepare to defend their neighbourhoods. The 6-month state of emergency enables the government to order citizens into military service. Engineer Merke Shifro was among Addis residents who said they were ready to heed the call.
I am young. I will participate in the war, in whatever young people should do. I am planning to head to the front line.
Authorities are also allowed, with a court order, to detain for the duration of the state of the emergency anyone suspected of collaborating with terrorist groups. The TPLF was designated as such in May. After the state of emergency was declared, there were scattered reports of ethnic Tigrayans being arrested in the capital. Addis Ababa police and a government spokesperson did not respond to phone calls requesting comment. The TPLF led Ethiopia's ruling coalition for nearly 30 years, until Abiy came to power. Relations then soured, escalating into the conflict that has killed thousands, forced more than 2 million from their homes, and left 400,000 people in Tigray facing famine. As fighting has spread beyond Tigray, it has destabilized what was considered a stable Western ally in the volatile Horn of Africa region. Neighbouring Kenya said its national police had heightened security and vigilance along the border. The African Union said its chair was following the situation with deep concern and urged parties to enter into dialogue.
So fighting's been raging on for a year now between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali's government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front or TPLF. Who is at fault here? And could the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali have acted differently? Now, while the opinion is divided, he retains his popularity among his constituents, as the next report will tell you.
Despite global concern over Abiy's handling of the conflict, he is domestically strong. His party won a landslide victory in June in what Abiy hailed as the country's first free and fair elections following decades of repressive rule. But the vote was also overshadowed by an opposition boycott and violence, including the war in Tigray.
Although the 6th national election couldn't be said to be free from all blemishes and as successful as we desired it would be, it has opened up a new chapter to actualize the dream of establishing and sustaining a democratic system, which had been a question for a long time. It's opened a new chapter and made us move one step forward.
Conflict broke out in Tigray 11 months ago between federal troops and forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The United Nations says hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing famine conditions due to a government aid blockade. The government denies it is preventing aid deliveries.
Talking about a humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia, the United Nations says up to 7 million people in the Ethiopian regions of Tigray, Amhara and Afar, including 5 million in Tigray, where some 400,000 people are estimated to be living in famine-like conditions. The net report talks about the hunger and violence against women that is threatening to blow into a major crisis.
Saba was just 3 years old when she died of malnutrition. That was last month, as her mother tried to flee violence that has spread from Ethiopia's Tigray into neighbouring Amhara. Pictures on her phone are all Habtam Akeli has left of her daughter, having pleaded with doctors to save her child.
They told me she was severely affected by malnutrition and they could not help. Then they gave me some syrup and tablets. She passed away exactly a week later, on a Sunday.
Saba is just one victim of the hunger and violence that has swept through northern Ethiopia since war broke out between the federal military and forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front nearly a year ago. In July, having taken back much of Tigray, the TPLF pushed into Amhara, whose forces have been fighting alongside federal troops. The Tigrayan advance sent around 250,000 people fleeing their homes, the United Nations says. Habtam is among thousands who arrived in the town of Dessie, escaping bloodshed further north. She says there was little food in areas under Tigrayan control, and that Tigrayan forces took scarce medicine from local pharmacies. Getachew, spokesperson for the TPLF, denied Tigrayan forces had looted local pharmacies. He said they'd set up a generator to alleviate water shortages in Habtam's area. Reuters was not able to independently verify Habtam's account, as her home is in an area off limits to journalists and phone connections are down. But people don't just have hunger to fear. At a camp in Dessie, Sada says she was raped. The attack was carried out at her home by an armed man in plain clothes speaking the Tigrayan language, she says, in an area under Tigrayan control.
After, he yelled at me, "Get dressed now." I was so afraid at this point that I was going to lose my life and quickly said okay. Then, he grabbed his gun and left my house as I was getting dressed.
She provided as evidence a card showing she had visited a hospital in Dessie for treatment. When asked about the rape, the TPLF's Getachew said any reported incident would be investigated, and that the actions of one man should not implicate the Tigrayan forces in general. Both sides in the conflict have accused the other of committing atrocities, and each side denies allegations against them. The TPLF says the Ethiopian military recently launched an offensive to dislodge the Tigrayans from Amhara. The military and government have not answered calls seeking information, but diplomats are worried the renewed fighting will further destabilize Ethiopia, and for Tigray and its surrounding areas, deepen the crisis of hunger and violence.
Meanwhile, the TPLF and its allies, including the Oromo Liberation Army, have formed a new united front against Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali's government. The alliance was sealed in the US capital, Washington, D.C. The new group is called United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces. It wants to bring down Abiy Ahmed Ali's government by force or negotiation to then form a transitional government.
Footage aired on Tigrayan television has shown TPLF fighters in Dessie and Kombolcha, two towns claimed to have been captured in recent days. The TPLF, which has been battling the federal military for a year, says it has advanced further, reaching the town of Kamis. That's 200 miles north of Addis Ababa. The government accuses the TPLF of exaggerating its territorial gains. A spokesperson indicated fighting is just south of Kombolcha and also denied a TPLF claim that it is closing in on Mile. Capturing that town could enable the TPLF to cut off the highway linking Addis Ababa to Ethiopia's coastal neighbour, Djibouti. But another concern for Abiy is the newly announced United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces. It includes the TPLF, and its creation was confirmed by two other members, the Oromo Liberation Army and the Ago Democratic Movement. Several of the groups have armed fighters, although it's not clear if they all do. A TPLF spokesperson did not respond to requests for comment. The TPLF dominated Ethiopian politics for nearly 3 decades before Abiy came to power and had ruled with increasing authoritarianism. Abiy's spokesperson, Bilene Sayoum, said in a post on Twitter that the opening up of the political space since Abiy took office had given ample opportunity for contenders to settle their differences at the ballot box. She did not refer directly to the new alliance. African and Western nations have called for an immediate ceasefire. US envoy Jeffrey Feltman has met with the chair of the African Union, as well as the Ethiopian Defense Minister, Finance Minister, and Deputy Prime Minister.
But that did not stop some people in Addis Ababa to hold a rally in support of the Ethiopian government. Now, their anger was also directed against Western media, whom they accused of bias.
Tens of thousands of Ethiopians rallied in the capital Addis Ababa in support of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and in many cases in opposition to the United States. Forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front have threatened to march on the capital, prompting a state of emergency. In Addis, protesters like Tigist Lemma were angry at a US call for the Ethiopian government to begin talks with the TPLF, which has been designated a terrorist group.
They want to destroy our country like they did Afghanistan. They will never succeed. We are Ethiopians. We are children of Adwa. With which TPLF are we going to negotiate? The one that killed and raped us? One that stabbed our mothers and fathers with combat knives? We will never, ever negotiate with them.
Protesters also held signs denouncing fake news in Ethiopia. The government has complained about foreign coverage of the conflict, with Abiy's spokesperson tweeting that orchestrated media propaganda against Ethiopia is escalating. US President Joe Biden's administration accused Ethiopia of gross violations of human rights in the year-long conflict with the northern rebellious forces. The Ethiopian government has said it takes all allegations of human rights violations seriously and is carrying out investigations. Washington has also said it opposes any TPLF advance towards the capital. Under the state of emergency, the government can order citizens of a certain age into military service. But at the rally, there was a call of restraint from popular singer Tariku Gangsi. He said youths should not go to the front line and that elders should go instead, asking for reconciliation. His speech ended when his microphone was cut off. It was unclear by whom.
The United Nations Security Council has expressed deep concern in a rare and unanimous statement about the expansion and intensification of military clashes in Ethiopia. The 15-member council called for refraining from inflammatory hate speech and incitement to violence and divisiveness.
The members of the Security Council reaffirm their strong commitment to the sovereignty, political independence, territorial integrity, and unity of Ethiopia.
The United States has since advised its citizens to leave Ethiopia as soon as possible.
We are concerned by the expansion of the conflict, by the expansion of the fighting from Tigray and into surrounding areas. Of course, public accounts have spoken to the advance of the TPLF and the OLA and their allies, including towards the capital city. We have underscored the need and the imperative for all parties to the conflict, the TPLF, the Ethiopian government, the OLA, and others, to engage in negotiations towards a ceasefire immediately and without preconditions. The only solution in this case is for the parties to the conflict to engage in dialogue towards a negotiated ceasefire. That is the only way that the violence will be diminished and ultimately be abated. That is the only way that the humanitarian emergency that people in Tigray and surrounding regions are experiencing, that's the only way that humanitarian emergency will be mitigated. So we've been very clear with the parties in public and in private as well.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India. Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in Middle East countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now. With the world's largest COVID vaccination drive, India is leading the way. As the vaccine reaches every corner of the nation, do not forget the mantra, Dawai bhi, Kadai bhi. Let's continue our fight against COVID-19. Vaccination along with social distancing, sanitization and masks.
Mask up, India!
Put your mask on and cover your nose and be safe.
Mask Up India.
All right, time to bring in my guests on the show. Joining me is former Indian ambassador to Ethiopia, Gurjit Singh. Ambassador Singh was also India's envoy to the African Union, Germany, Indonesia and ASEAN. And also joining me is journalist Samuel Getachew, who is based in Addis Ababa. Samuel, I want us to look in the rear view mirror, as it were, so that our viewers can have a better understanding of how and when the conflict started and who started it. Now, I ask you this because we are told, and correct me if I'm wrong, the conflict started in November 2020 when forces loyal to the TPLF seized Ethiopian military bases in Tigray, and in response, Prime Minister Abiy sent more troops to the northern region. And also in the run-up to this event, we saw Prime Minister Abiy launch and float the Prosperity Party, which the TPLF did not join. And Prime Minister Abiy postponed the elections in Tigray in August, which TPLF again opposed and went ahead and held its own election. So, put this into context for our viewers, Samuel.
I think that's a tough question. If you're looking for sound bites, it would be really difficult for me to say. But I know for a fact that Ethiopia has been having ethnic conflicts, just like your nation, the great nation of India. We've been having this ethnic warfare for a long, long time. It started well before the dates that you mentioned. People having issues with their neighbors, and there were many places where we couldn't even travel. There was the issue of ethnic federalism that was introduced by a TPLF-led government, a coalition government, that really defined Ethiopians in a sense that you are an ethnic instead of as a citizen, where you're asked to produce your ID, and under your name there's always the Amhara, Tigray, blah blah, and that has always been a problem. So that built the foundation for Ethiopia to really have this kind of conflict. Many of us who have been in Ethiopia for a while knew this was coming. It wasn't one incident per se, as you mentioned. Again, you're simplifying a big problem. It's much bigger than that. It's a larger picture. The foundation was built for this conflict to move forward, and here we are, affecting a conflict that has affected millions of people, displaced at least 2 million. So many people that are facing famine-like condition, and again, the coexistence of the country is shaky at the moment.
Right. Ambassador Singh, I want you to weigh in on this issue as well. How do you look at this latest conflict in Ethiopia, and has that conflict got anything to do with issues such as religion and ethnicity, or is it simply a case of power struggle, pure power politics?
Well, I really feel empathetic for the people of Ethiopia. They are a very hardworking and decent people. And I think what is happening to them leaves me quite shell-shocked. I don't think they deserve this. I really think today, situation in Ethiopia, I would describe in Hobbesian terms. It's nasty, it's brutish, but doesn't seem to be short. So I think this is the crux of the matter. Now, I don't disagree with what Ato Getachew says, except he's seeing it from within. So the micro management of the issues is what he says. But when you are an outsider like me, I think we are able to divide it more clearly. In 1995, when the new constitution was adopted, the principle of ethnic federalism was adopted. It served Ethiopia well for about 30 years or 25 years. But it was not an ideal solution. It needed to grow beyond. The untimely death of Prime Minister Meles stopped that process. And you ended up with a power struggle among the four major constituents of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, which, as Ato Getachew said, was TPLF-led and dominated. But now you had a prime minister from the south, but the desire of the people of Ethiopia, particularly of Oromia, for greater aspirations came up, and that could not be managed. At this time, Prime Minister Abiy was drafted, mainly because he was from Oromia, to quell this dissent and bring in a new form of politics. He did this to an extent, but ultimately it led to a cleavage with the TPLF, while the other parties seem to have agreed. This cleavage with the TPLF in 2018, which led to all of them leaving Addis Ababa and gathering in Mekele, was the first sign of trouble. And thereon, it needed political management. But it slowly spiraled into total conflict, leading to divisiveness over the elections, the TPLF securing the Northern Command headquarters and taking away its arms, and after that it is history. So I would say that the war and the political divisiveness had a had a time when it could have been managed. That was lost. So today is where you are. I don't think it was inevitable.
Fair enough. Samuel, let's focus a bit, if you will, on the TPLF itself. Now, the TPLF, we are given to understand, dominated Ethiopian politics for nearly 3 decades, but lost influence when Prime Minister Abiy took office in 2018. Now, today, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali and his one-time ally, the TPLF chief, Gebre Michael, are sworn enemies. Similarly, the TPLF allied itself with the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or the EPLF, in the 1970s to fight against the then military regime. But today, we find the Eritrean soldiers join forces with the Ethiopian army to attack the Tigray rebels, including TPLF.
Let me just go back and reflect on what the ambassador said. I don't think the ambassador is an outsider in Ethiopia. Indians have done so much. They are our teachers. They've taught us in school. They've been our examples and mentors. And this ambassador is no outsider. We see him as one of us. So I just want to correct what the ambassador said. But going back to your question, yes, rebel groups always team up with different actors for their interest. We've seen in recent weeks as TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Front, partnered, arch enemies in the past. In the 27 years that the TPLF was prominent in the country, the OLA really fought against them. They said they weren't in government in their interest, and they fought them. Many people have died as a result. But now they're finding a common enemy within the Ethiopian government in this prime minister. So it's a fact. And you mentioned Eritrea. Well, sure. The prime minister has said the reason the Eritreans were involved was because of keeping up their interest or keeping their borders intact with a potential attack from TPLF. But we've seen reports of from the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and from the UN, led by a prominent woman from Chile, who has really lived this kind of nightmare we're going through at the moment in Chile, where her family were victims. And we respect her. I respect her. And the reality is, the report has said there are many allegations committed by all sides. So that's where we are. I've been to many places in Ethiopia. I've seen the impact on the ground. And the report, while it's not inclusive, while it hasn't gone a distance. For example, I know some of the main actors who participated in this report weren't able to access some towns in Tigray. While it focuses on Tigray, exactly, this is the kind of report we need. It's a down payment to a future report. And also, I've been hearing all kinds of allegations, uniform-like, in Afar, Amhara, and Tigray. And we just have to find a way for Ethiopia to heal because the country is in pain at the moment.
Indeed. Ambassador Singh, the TPLF accuses Prime Minister Abiy of centralizing power at the expense of the regional states or the states themselves. Now, how valid is this argument? Do you agree with the TPLF when it says it wants more devolution, not centralization? Also, please explain what federalism and confederalism means in the Ethiopian context.
So the 1995, after 1991, when the EPRDF came, they adopted this principle of confederation, which is still enshrined in the constitution of Ethiopia. This meant that if one of the regional states wanted to leave the confederation, they could. And that is how Eritrea separated from Ethiopia. So even today, the constitution of Ethiopia still has that principle. And that is the difference between a federation and a confederation. But I don't think seriously that should be today because, under Prime Minister Abiy, if I'm not wrong, 2 new regional states have actually been created through local referenda as part of the election. So on one hand, the Prosperity Party has been creating new regional states. On the other hand, the TPLF says that the Prosperity Party is a centralizing force. Mr. Getachew has rightly pointed out that this concept of ethnic federalism was beginning to wear thin, and many ethnicities felt that this federalism was not serving their purpose and they needed more freedom than what the ruling coalition at that time provided. So when the Prosperity Party, well, actually Prime Minister Abiy took over as an EPRDF Prime Minister, when he formed the Prosperity Party, the theology behind it seems centralist, not federal. And this seems to have put a spoke in many ethnicities beyond the Tigray. I think there are unhappiness and violent incidents in many parts of Ethiopia besides the Tigray. And this is proven by the fact that the elections could not be held in several parts of Ethiopia, not only the Tigray. So this you see now with the OLA. Now, OLA is an Oromo party, as Ato Getachew said, they're fighting for years against the TPLF to get more rights. And today they are fighting against this government to get more rights. So obviously they also feel that there is no much difference between the two governments in giving them their rights. Now they seem to be joined by some minor parties at a ceremony in Washington, DC. But I think what we need to understand is the whole political process needs much more adjustment than what has been provided, and it needs to do so peacefully, not through more civil war.
Right. Samuel, let's focus a bit, if you will, on the other protagonist. That's the TPLF chief, Gebre Michael. Now, what do we know about him? Where is he and who are his allies in his fight against the Abiy government? And is he receiving support from outside Ethiopia as well?
Again, you're asking me a tough question and expecting a soundbite. I wish I knew. If I had known, I would have said. And that's the question that's confusing many people, the strength that the TPLF has shown. From the perspective of anyone who's anti or for TPLF, their strength is they've shown in the last few weeks is really overwhelming. Not just fighting within their own borders, but also getting into Amhara and Afar. There are many accusations that they're receiving aid from Egypt. The Prime Minister said they're receiving, he said their government knows and that they're receiving support from non-Ethiopians, he said. So that's where we are. But this conflict has really confused all of us. We have a hard time verifying the information. Social media seems to dominate the conversations, and they reach out to Ethiopians much faster than we ever could. So again, there are many, many accusations who may be supporting the Ethiopian side or the TPLF. But again, the reality is I've been to many of these villages and towns. There's no better description to describe this conflict than to say it's heartbreaking. There are many, many people being affected, and I hope there will be some kind of closure because again, many countries that are much, much richer than Ethiopia have gone through this kind of conflict. It has taken them many, many years to even attempt to go forward. And with the many people that are said to be killed and affected, I don't even know where Ethiopia will begin to address not only the root cause of the conflict, also the victims. So again, by choice or circumstances, we're focusing on the victims. And I hope, just like India, whenever there's a disaster, we hear of numbers, 1,000 people have died, 2,000 people. But, we want to give faces to these numbers. And I think that's the legacy we should leave I'm talking about myself. And that's what we intend to do. But, history has, countries like Ethiopia have been obsessed with history. There's nothing wrong with history, but Ethiopians really, really deserve peace.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in Middle East countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now. As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India. With the world's largest COVID vaccination drive, India is leading the way. As the vaccine reaches every corner of the nation, do not forget the mantra, Dawai bhi, Kadai bhi. Let's continue our fight against COVID-19. Vaccination along with social distancing, sanitization and masks.
Mask up, India!
Put your mask on and cover your nose and be safe.
Mask Up India.
Ambassador Singh, how would you describe Ethiopia-India relations, and how would you define India's role in the UN Security Council when it comes to issues related to Ethiopia, number one? Number two, how do you see the role or positions taken by other countries in the UN Security Council, namely Russia, China, as opposed to the US and its allies in the European Union?
Thank you. So India-Ethiopia relations were one of the best. Among our best partners in Africa was Ethiopia. And, we have many, we started the Harar Military Academy there in 1957. We started the Pan-African E-Network project there in 2009. So they have been kind of the laboratory for India's engagement with Africa. And there is a huge amount of Indian private investment, trade, loans to build infrastructure and sugar factories. So it has been a very successful relationship. India wants the quick restoration of peace and stability so we can go back to doing our peaceful business with Ethiopia. And we want more Ethiopian students to keep coming to India and, having these exchanges. India has taken the position in the Security Council that Africa should be allowed to deal with its own problems. Mm-hmm. I support that fully. I believe, and India has also said that we should have a ceasefire, humanitarian assistance, an end to hate speech, and let there be negotiations in a peaceful atmosphere under the Constitution of Ethiopia. I think that were the points India made in the Security Council in the 12th meeting 2 days ago on this subject. But the Security Council has not been able to pass even a single resolution on Ethiopia, mainly because the United States and its allies, and China and Russia largely, do not agree on the approach. In this, India has taken a middle ground, but we have also said that let's not interfere and let's leave it to the African Union to move ahead. Now, the Americans and the Europeans believe that the African Union is not moving ahead. And therefore, something needs to be done because the killings are going on, the war is spreading, the TPLF is coming southwards, and more people are dying. Getachew mentioned the human rights report. It's nauseating to read that report. So we need to bring. So I believe You need to have a ceasefire and humanitarian access. That is one box. Second box will be the political engagement. After you decide what you're going to talk about and who you're going to talk about. But we need not link what the political talks are with the ceasefire right now. I mean, you need to have a proper ceasefire. The Ethiopian government declared ceasefire in June, but it did not hold because of various reasons. And I don't blame either side. Now, the Americans, I think, suddenly have woken up that there is something happening here which we need to do something about. So their special envoy is now coming and going from Addis Ababa fairly frequently. I'm not certain who all he's able to meet. I see his name, but I don't see all the important. In between now, the Americans have started threatening sanctions by putting Ethiopia on a list of people to be suspended from AGOA, suspending the Safaricom loan, and many things which could have an economic impact on it. But I think we don't need too many initiatives. So I think in the spirit of the UN Security Council press statement, we should support the AU High Representative for the Horn of Africa, which is President Obasanjo of Nigeria. Now, I know that this week he has met both Prime Minister Abiy and the Tigrayan leadership. From those pictures, I understand you asked this question, where is Gabriel Debrisol? He seems to be in Mekele as per that picture with Obasanjo. Now, I believe Obasanjo is the right man to put up a plan which will have a ceasefire, come humanitarian access in one box, followed by talks on what to talk about and who will attend the talks. I think he is going to come up with a plan, and I wish him Godspeed for the sake of the people of Ethiopia.
That gives me a perfect segue into my question to you, Samuel. How do you view the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Ethiopia as we speak? We are given to understand that famine is a potential threat, hunger is rampant, violence against women in particular have been reported, and of course the problem of refugees spilling over into neighboring countries including Sudan, and also people displaced internally.
Well, I echo what the ambassador said. The former president of Nigeria is a perfect example of the ideals of African solution to African problem that every leader has been singing about for the last decade at least. And I hope he's successful. He was rejected by the TPLF leadership at the beginning of his appointment. But now they're meeting with him, they're endorsing his idea of finding some kind of solution. But in terms of the humanitarian disaster that we're watching, I did go and see many of the places. They are overwhelmed with needs and, a country that was once aid dependent, moving into, something that's similar to your country is facing in terms of the economical success. Is really going back and trying to give social safety nets with a limited resources that it has. So the need and the potential to help, they don't even match. I've seen people go without food and, students, young people that are not going to school, which is a future problem for Ethiopia. Aid organizations that are overwhelmed with needs and no infrastructure and things that can't even reach the victims because of the violence. It's a real disaster. And I hope when this conflict ends, I hope that would be the focus for all, not just Ethiopians, but friends of Ethiopians. But going back to the influence of India, I have focused on the teachers that were our mentors, our teachers. There's no family who hasn't really benefited from the educational system of India. I lived in Zambia, for instance. Almost all of my teachers were Indians, and the same in Ethiopia. I was in Harar, the city of Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie, and some of the most beautiful infrastructures are built by Indians. There are many Indians that are still working in India as teachers and as business people, making and contributing to, the wonderful story that is Ethiopia. Still, we haven't given up on the idea of Ethiopia. We shouldn't. It's a beautiful country. The ambassador could tell you that. Has problems, but has a potential. But again, I hope friends of Ethiopians and Ethiopia will focus on assisting Ethiopians that need help. Again, millions of people are still facing all kinds of issues, including displacement, famine, and human rights abuses. And I hope the focus will be on helping them so that we can at least pay a down payment to move this country move forward.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in Middle East countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now. With the world's largest COVID vaccination drive, India is leading the way. As the vaccine reaches every corner of the nation, do not forget the mantra, Dawai bhi, Kadai bhi. Let's continue our fight against COVID-19. Vaccination along with social distancing, sanitization and masks.
Mask up, India!
Put your mask on and cover your nose and be safe.
Mask Up India.
Samuel, what's the situation like in Addis Ababa as we speak? Are things as normal as they could be?
Well, in the daytime, it's as normal as it gets, I have to be honest. CNN came out and said there are forces by the suburbs of Addis Ababa. That was proven to be wrong in an era of misinformation, fake news, and all kinds of stuff. Social media is important, and it really brought some kind of panic on the population. Many embassies are moving their citizens away from Ethiopia, even including Zambia. Which the president tweeted saying he rented a flight and took all his citizens out of Ethiopia. The same was Canada and the US and British and Britain and all of them and a number of Scandinavian nations. But again, the reality is, we don't know what will happen in a few days or even in weeks. But while saying in the daytime everything is normal, at night is different. People are being detained. There are checkpoints. People are being asked for IDs, knock on doors. But again, we're in a state of emergency. It's normal. I mean, the US had it during George Bush, during the Big Act. And the same thing during the 1970s in Canada, during the era of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister of Canada. So other countries have had it, and I hope Ethiopia would really, we can't be having state of emergency every other year, but I hope this is a learning lesson. Unfortunately in life, we can't go back to what happened in the last year. And I hope, the prayer of your ambassador and the prayer of Ethiopians will move this country forward.
And finally, Ambassador Singh, you get the last word. Looking ahead now, how do you see the situation panning out in the next few weeks or months? In hindsight, do you think Prime Minister Abiy made some not so right choices? Could he have acted differently? And do you see an end to this conflict anytime soon?
I think there are many more wise people in Ethiopia who will decide whether the Prime Minister made wise choices or not. It is the reality that he won the election handsomely. It is the reality. So I think in Addis Ababa, he's extremely popular. There were some pictures I saw of, rallies behind him. So I think Addis Ababa is a story by itself. But the story in the outlying regions is a bit different. And that is where you need to accommodate, but without forgetting the level of support that it has in Addis Ababa. So all these need to be. So I see an Obasanjo plan within a week. Among the items I mentioned, I think it should also call upon extraction of all foreign forces. I think that is very important. You can't have Eritreans in Ethiopia when peace has to be there. They'll never want it. Then you need to start humanitarian access, which is the most important thing for the people of Ethiopia. I think the people of Ethiopia can live with any government, but they cannot keep living when there's no medicine, power, education, food. These are essential. And then I think there has to be a political conference which needs to be very diverse and inclusive to decide the future of Ethiopia within the constitution first. And then if they believe that the constitution needs to be amended, the processes need to be followed. But what I'm saying sounds so simple. The path is a troubled one ahead. And I wish Ethiopia success.
Absolutely. Right, on that note, may I thank both my guests, Samuel Getachew for joining us from Addis Ababa and Ambassador Gurjit Singh for making time for us here at DD India. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.